we're sitting at the high table here, and we haven't decided whether there'll be communion at the end or not, but there will be some red wine. So welcome Michael Church, Andy Hamilton, John Walters, and Ed McKone. Can we give them a round of applause? We seem to be past the days when you could do a concert in St John Smith Square or Wigmore Hall and rush out the next morning and buy the Times, the Financial Times, the Guardian, the Telegraph, and there it would be. How many words? 250 words?
In those days,
yeah. On the other hand, my best review once was if this critic were a breathalyzer, he would have turned green at this piece. And contrary to that, I've had 2 web reviews recently which were extended, intelligent, long, and weren't 250 words, and no mention of green and breathalyzers. Extended essays almost on what we were doing. Tonight we'll talk in turn and kind of about 3 things. Where have we come from in terms of representing music out in the world through the media? Where are we now, and is it changed, and was it changed for the good or ill? And what we're going to do about it, if there's anything we can do, but to think forward and positively. So we're going to start with Michael. I'm going to ask him a couple of questions. So, when was the heyday of music journalism was it Neville Cardus in newspapers?
Well, it was certainly in the 60s, because there's so much more of it. There was obviously a great deal more talent and more ability more chance to display it. But really, it goes right back. It goes back to Schuman writing about Chopin, unforgettably about Chopin, hailing this new genius in 1830. And it goes back to Berlioz, a great critic.
So was it more practitioner-led and less journalist-led? Less writer-led?
Some composers have always been great critics.
Yeah.
They've always been great critics, must have put it. And I think it's still to a certain extent true, but far less. What if I can sort of go back autobiographically to explain how I come to be in this game, because I came in accidentally to it, and I began as a dance critic, which was very pleasant, but ultimately, quite quickly, was frustrating, because it's a small world, and you very soon say what you've got to say about each choreographer, and then it's all done. Television criticism in the 70s and 80s was great, because it mattered then much more than it does now. But music criticism is actually a thing which I didn't want to do ever, because I love music. It's my first love, and I wanted to keep it a private passion. And I really came into it because I was invited to it, but not as a critic, but as a feature writer. And for the first 10 years of writing about music, it was as a feature writer. The invitation to review came about 10 years ago, and I still feel, after 10 years, I'm still learning the craft.
I was going to ask you about the craft.
The craft is actually, it is very demanding, much more than a feature. I mean, writing a feature, 1,200 words, is easy in comparison with writing a review in 400 words, which is the standard size, because in a feature there are no rules, you can go your own way, you can go in all kinds of directions, whereas in a review you've got to do a great deal of stuff very succinctly and readably in a small space. You've got to not only report on what you've been listening to, you've also got to evaluate it, obviously, and it helps to do that, to compare with other performances. So in other words, what you've already heard comes into it. A good critic has to be able to compare and contrast. And then, of course, if it's new music, you've got to explain it. You've got to do something to proselytize if you believe in it, or explain why you think it doesn't work. That, of course, is the most important part of criticism, to actually help music to develop and help its becoming more what it wants to be.
Because it's interesting word, critic, isn't it? Criticism.
Yeah.
You're not an exponent, or you're not there to blow the trumpet about what you're writing about. You're there to be separate from it and criticise.
Well, of course, I mean, the words, it used to be called a notice in the old days.
That's right.
They were called notices, and that's because you were literally announcing a thing that happened and how it was. And that element must always be there in a review. So these are all these elements, they all have to be in the review, plus which it's got to be readable. And of course the great question with music reviews is why do it? Because why would it be read? Because it's over, the reader wasn't there, and almost certainly wasn't there, and therefore why are you bothering to waste their time telling them what it was like. It's like a gourmet who had a meal. But okay, you had a meal, but the reader didn't have the meal, and why were they able to know? So therefore you've got to make it in some way, if you can, provocative intellectually, or you've got to inform, or you've got to say something, if you're very lucky indeed, new. But of course that very rarely happens.
And what are you looking for when you go to a performance in the Wigmore Hall or something?
Well,
what strikes you? What are you looking for?
Obviously I go hoping to have a great time. And I often do that because it is the best chamber players in the world.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, you know, it's nice if you can be given some new slant on something. If you can see a new interpretation. That does occasionally. It happened last night. I heard a performance of the late work by Schuman, which I'd never heard before, never heard so well before, know it so clearly, and that to me was a small revelation. But that's quite unusual. Usually, if it's a classical work, the classical canon, you go in order to have as good a time as you can, and you're lucky if you're lucky.
Do you prepare and study and all that, or
if it's if it's opera, of course, yes, immensely. I mean, you have to prepare like that. If you're doing the Ring, you've got to do a lot of homework before you go. I want to say about music criticism in general that it's in some funny kind of way a sort of oasis of integrity in journalism now. This may sound strange, but most journalism is under immense pressure, economic pressure, even political pressure, and certainly PR pressure. And of course there is PR pressure in music, plenty of it, though in fact the pressure is applied not to people like me, like us, it's applied to editors, who then, the PR hopes, will apply it to us. That's how it works, that's how PRs work. And some are incredibly effective, and they know exactly how to button twist the editor to get them to do what they want. And part of our job is to resist the pressures that come from the editor, come from the PR via the editor. But on the whole, the beauty of our trade, as I see it, is that because our reviews are small, and generally they never have a picture byline, but they often don't have pictures, it means that we're not noticed. And there's no better place to be in journalism now than not noticed. Because if you're noticed, you are instantly under threat.
from?
Well, you're under threat because in newspapers, of course, have passed the stage where they're stable. They'll never be stable again. It's a dying industry, really. We're in the last few years of newspapers. And I think because of that, editors are changing more and more frequently. And each new editor coming in, on the whole, likes to make quick changes. And the easiest change to make is in the arts, because it doesn't cause too much trouble. And arts reviewers, like me, like most of us, are freelancers, and we haven't got contracts, and so we can just be got rid of, just goodbye. If you are prominent, then you are in danger. It's all too easy to get rid of them, a critic, and then replace them with a celebrity critic or something. That is the danger. So I think we're lucky if we have small slots and no picture bylines.
Yeah, keep your head down. Yeah. Anyone want to respond to what Michael's said before we move on to Andy?
Can I ask from record companies?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, and also from musicians. And they have personal PRs. The Fly or the rich ones, they have their own personal PR.
Okay.
And you're saying that's got worse? The pressures have got worse?
That's got terrible.
It's got terrible?
Because, I mean, they know the editors well, and they know how to get the editors where they want them.
I think, to be fair to the PRs, you say that musicians are finding there's such a sort of massive amount of stuff around that they feel any kind of edge they can get in getting what they're doing noticed, and also taking up the actual physical job of making sure lots of people hear their music.
Yes.
That's why it's become a much more populated sphere. So I do hear a lot from PRs, and there's far more music out there, even if you like, filtered by people who actually have PRs. There's far more music than I have time to even listen to, let alone write about. But I can kind of feel the pain, because I know, you occasionally bump into musicians and say, well, we know this is a really good project. We're wondering if we should, spend so much a week for a period of time and get a PR just to get noticed. And then, it's an interesting conversation to have, because obviously I'm on the receiving end of PRs, and so are the editors, and so are the DJs and radio producers.
And do editors know anything about music?
Well, some do, a great deal, some don't. And of course, we're not dealing directly with, you know, in the case of the national paper, you're dealing with page editors and section editors. And then you're dealing with sub-editors who cut the copy and write the headlines and write the captions. So there's a whole, you know, the word editor is quite sort of fluid. I mean, in my other job, I am an editor, so I was quite sympathetic to that.
And just a brief line on PRs. Anybody who receives public funding to present an event knows the pressure to try and make sure that there is national coverage of what's done. And you also come under that slight moral anxiety where generally, for those of us working within the economy of new music, the pressures always come when you're dealing with somebody else's economy. And when a PR doesn't get out of bed for less than 250 quid a day, and you find somebody who's a good PR for less than 250 quid a day is quite hard going. And you know, many composers who would be happy to earn £250 a week.